Okay, Hari Bol. So, shall we start with Jai Radha Madhav? It's difficult to follow, so I'll just sing once myself and then we'll start, okay? Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari
Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhansa Parivrajakacharya Ashtotra Sat His Divine Grace Abhay Charanar Avinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Ki Jai Shri Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Ajnanatimiraandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padang Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So this is a program for the Sydney devotees, but even though we are having this on Zoom, for Sydney devotees, we are also having a simultaneous Facebook telecast, so devotees in other places can also join in. Whenever I address devotees from a particular city, then usually it's by Zoom for the devotees in that city, and then through Facebook others can also join in. So that is the system that I've been trying to follow. So I'm very, very happy to see all of you, and I do hope that you are all well, safe, healthy, happy, and Krishna conscious in the midst of this lockdown due to coronavirus pandemic. I hope you're all taking the required precautions, and also that you are utilizing your time, enhancing your Krishna consciousness in many different ways, more chanting, more reading, more hearing, taking care of health so you can serve Krishna better, etc. So I just saw a chat message that says you can't hear. Can you all hear me? If you can.
Yes, Maharaji, we can hear you. I will help Monica Mataji.
Okay. Okay, so yes, I'm very happy to see all of you again. What I'm thinking of doing is I started a series of lectures, and I've maintained the topic the same. For one lecture, I started by talking about the different Gauna rasas, the secondary rasas that exist in devotional service. We all know that, I'll summarize again briefly for the benefit of those who have not attended the previous lectures. As we all know, this is one of the fundamental teachings of Krishna consciousness, that every living entity has a personal and unique relationship with Lord Krishna. And that relationship can be broadly classified into 5 categories. The mellow of neutrality, Shantaras, the mellow of servitude, that is Dasyaras, the mellow of friendship, that is Sakhyaras, the mellow of paternal love, which is Vatsalyaras, and also the conjugal mood, which is the Shringararas or Madhuryaras. So these are the 5 mukhya rasas, that means the main rasas. So in the spiritual world, every single devotee has one such rasa in which he or she is relating to Krishna primarily. There could be a mix of some others that flavor it. So there are also secondary rasas or tastes or mellows in the relationship which tend to add some spice or flavor or some special relish to a particular mukhya rasa of the relationship to Krishna. And we started talking about that, and we were discussing these secondary rasas or the Gauna rasas. Now we spoke about the Hasya ras. Hasya means the ras of laughter or comedy or humor. Now, as I was mentioning in some of the earlier classes, humor and laughter is sometimes essential in life, but that doesn't mean that you laugh 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Then there's some psychological problem there. Yes? So if that becomes a mukhya rasa, then we have a problem. So it is a secondary rasa that comes and flavors the main rasa and then goes away. It comes conditionally, according to some context, it comes there. So there's Hasya rasa, there is Adbhuta rasa, the rasa of astonishment, of wonder. Yes? So that also comes in sometimes. It's not there all the time. So then today we are going to talk about Veer Rasa, the Rasa of chivalry, which also comes and goes. It doesn't exist all the time for a particular devotee in the spiritual world. Yes? So before we get on to Veer Rasa or the Rasa of chivalry, just a few introductory points. Essentially, whatever I have been discussing in the last few lectures has been based almost exclusively on the nectar of devotion. I'm sure you're all familiar with this book, and those of you who have studied Bhakti Shastri have done part 1 of the nectar of devotion. Srila Prabhupada's rendition of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the classic book of Srila Rupa Goswami. So, in order to understand this better, I'll be giving a little background as well about the concept of these rasas. And I'll relate to the lecture I gave this morning to the Bangalore devotees, and those of you who are on Facebook, you may have seen that. It is just incidental, because one of the verses in the section of verses I was reading this morning gave a definition of the word Narayana. Now we know Narayana is the name of the Lord. And I gave several the word Narayan and why the Lord is called Narayan. And one of the meanings that I mentioned there was the word Nar indicates the living entity, and Ayana, one of the meanings of Ayana is propensity. So because the Supreme Lord is the origin of all the propensities of the living entities, so he is called Narayana. So we all have so many propensities. We have a propensity to have some fun, to have some humor. So it's there in us because it's there in Krishna. Otherwise it's not possible it would be in us. Because Krishna is the supreme whole. He is the origin of everything. Therefore, whatever is visible in his parts and parcels must also be visible in him. The difference is that is visible in him in perfection, on the absolute plane, in complete purity, in wholesomeness. But in the living entities in this world, those very propensities that exist in Krishna are pervertedly reflected on the mundane plane. And therefore, these rasas, or these propensities rather, will be not so wholesome. They will not be always conducive to our real, true well-being. So, the rasa of humor I mentioned is there in Krishna, therefore it's there in us. Similarly, the rasa of astonishment is there in Krishna, so it's there in us. Similarly, the Veer Rasa, the rasa of chivalry, is there in Krishna, and therefore it's there in us. And I'm sure most of you are grihasthas, or all of you are grihasthas. You may experience the Veer Rasa in your grihastha relationships often. And you have your household tangles sometimes. But anyway, that was just a little joke. But the point is that the Veer Rasa also exists in humanity. Yeah, we see that happening so many times. So there are some people who have the chivalrous nature, just like the warriors and so on. But remember, the chivalrous nature or Veer Rasa does not simply mean quarreling uselessly. There are some people who like to quarrel and argue unlimitedly. Isn't that so? So, one time Srila Prabhupada was asked by some devotees, his disciples. They were complaining about another devotee who was very quarrelsome by nature. And so they complained to Prabhupada, what can we do about such and such devotee? He quarrels with everybody. So Prabhupada said, send him to Rishikesh and let him quarrel with the Mayavadis and his quarreling nature can be fulfilled. So we cannot justify our quarreling nature as being chivalrous or as being valorous or as being Veer Rasa. Yeah? So that chivalry that is reflected in the material world is also reflected in the three modes: sattva, rajas and tamas, goodness, passion and ignorance. Right? So the mundane rasas are there. In today's morning class, again coincidentally, one of the questions somebody asked was that we can develop fearlessness of death by being fully Krishna conscious. But is it possible to be fearless of death without being Krishna conscious? And I gave a brief answer, and I'll slightly elaborate on that. Because fearlessness is also a kind of a valorous thing. If you're always afraid, how can you be chivalrous? How can you be valorous? So when you are valorous, you exhibit some valor and bravery, you have to be a little fearless. So I'll elaborate a little bit on what I said there this morning. And I'll say that just as everything in this material world can be understood in terms of the three modes of nature, sattva, rajas, tamas, similarly, bravery, valor, chivalry, etc., can also be understood in terms of the three modes. So sattvic Veer Rasa, remember that now the Veer Rasas I'm talking about are mundane rasas, they're not bhakti rasas. Okay? This is a very important point. Because whatever we have discussed in the earlier classes on Hasya Rasa, Adbhuta Rasa, these are all Bhakti Rasas. So there is Hasya Bhakti Ras, there's Adbhuta Bhakti Ras. Today we are going to talk of Veer Bhakti Ras. But presently I am discussing the Veer Rasa as reflected on the mundane plane. So we are not talking of Bhakti Ras right now. So the Veer Rasa in Sattva Guna is of a person who is completely at peace with the world, has cultivated some basic spiritual knowledge, or maybe a little advanced spiritual knowledge as well, not necessarily bhakti. And because of the cultivation of all these sattvic qualities, forgiveness, kindness, steadiness of mind, sense control, and all of these things, he is pretty much fearless. So that there is that sattvic fearlessness. Then there is passionate fearlessness. So sattvic fearlessness is found amongst the genuine true brahmanas. Now rajasic fearlessness is found amongst the true kshatriyas. It's important, the word true is important. Not just anybody who claims to be a kshatriya, but true kshatriyas. Because when they go out into the battlefield, sometimes kshatriyas, they enjoy that risk and the thrill and the danger of the battle. And they even sometimes don't mind being injured in the battle. That's part of what drives them. It's their juice of life, so to speak. So even in the Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata, there are so many narrations where we see in the history of the world and the geography of the world also. For example, the Spartans in Greece were one such community. They were full of brave warriors, and that's how they were born like that, and that was very much the topmost value they inculcated in their children and young people. So you had the samurai and the others in Japan. You have so many communities like that. In India also you have some communities like that.
I think Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Okay. Okay. Am I on the screen again? Can you see me and hear me? Okay. I'm sorry, I had some problem with my internet because I've been using so much of the internet and everybody around is using internet, so all the connections seem to be not so good here. So what was I saying? Yes, I was speaking about the Gorkhas. You heard that part, right? Okay. So I was saying that they're not very tall, they're quite short, but they're really very, very brave. So I remember one former army man saying that if anyone says he's not afraid of death, he's either lying or he's a Gorkha. So that was the way he praised the Gorkhas, you see. So the point here is that this is the valor of the Kshatriyas. So we saw the fearlessness of the Brahmanas, then the fearlessness of the Kshatriyas, and then there's the fearlessness of those in the mode of ignorance. Imagine a man who's drunk, completely drunk, intoxicated, out of his senses. He gets a kind of fearlessness that in his proper senses he would not have, normally had. So he will get into a quarrel with somebody, a fist fight with somebody, because that intoxication is giving him a false sense of bravery. So yes, fearlessness can exist even without Krishna consciousness in the material world, but it is all in a perverted way. It is in a material way. But what we are talking about is, Veer Bhakti Rasa. So therefore, this Bhakti Rasa, this Veer Rasa has to be in connection with Krishna. Otherwise, where is the Bhakti involved here? We are not here to simply discuss ordinary, mundane, rasas of this world. We are here to discuss Krishna consciousness. So, we must remember this is Veer Bhakti Rasa. And that can only come in Krishna consciousness. So, Srila Prabhupada mentions here also, I'll define how he mentions it. He says, when on account of love and devotional service for the Lord, there is special valorous enthusiasm, the resultant activities are called chivalrous. So mark the words. Such chivalrous enthusiasm must be on account of Krishna. It is out of love for Krishna that we become very valorous or chivalrous or brave or fearless and so on. So that is the Veer Rasa. It's a long section actually. It may be not possible to have it in one session. Let us see how it goes. Now, so you know that in the spiritual world there are two parts. There is the Vaikuntha part and there is the Goloka Vrindavan part. Correct? So in Goloka Vrindavan we have the two-armed Krishna who is playing on the flute, who frolics with the cowherd boys, grazes the cows, does Rasa Leela with the gopis, and is the darling of Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj. There are various other places connected to Goloka Vrindavan, which we won't go into now. There is Mathura, there is Ayodhya, there is Dwarka, these places. But apart from this, then there is Ayodhya, where there are innumerable spiritual planets on which the Supreme Lord resides as Lord Narayan, the four-armed form of Lord Narayan. So the difference, as you are all aware, between Vaikuntha and Goloka Vrindavan principally is that in Vaikuntha, In the innumerable Vaikuntha planets, the innumerable devotees of the Lord, they worship Lord Narayan in a mood of awe and reverence, understanding him to be the Supreme Lord. Whereas in Goloka Vrindavan, there may be understanding of Krishna being God or there may not be. Usually there isn't. And there is no conception of Krishna being God in their loving relationships. Whether Krishna is God or not, that does not interfere in the sweetness and the intimacy of the relationships that the devotees have in Goloka Vrindavan with Krishna. That same Goloka Vrindavan was also manifested here on earth. It is still here. The Vrindavan abode is here. Krishna appeared here 5,000 years ago and performed those pastimes that he performs over there in this Vrindavan also. Now, in Vrindavan, we have all the 5 main rasas that I mentioned earlier to you. The 5 main rasas. In Vaikuntha, in the world of Narayan, do you know how many rasas are there? Can anyone say? If you know it, just raise your hand. How many rasas are found in Vaikuntha, the world of Lord Narayan, where the Lord is worshipped with awe and reverence? Yes. Who was raised? Yes, Mrigan. Can you say? Can you unmute for a moment and say? Or just type it.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Is it true to Shanta Rasa and Dasya Rasa?
Okay. It is, you're almost there but not quite. It's called, in Vaikuntha you have 2.5 rasas. You have the Shanta Rasa and you also have the Dasya Rasa, but you have another half a rasa. So what is that half rasa? That half rasa is half friendship, half sakhya. What does it mean to be half friendship? It means that this friendship that is available or that is seen in the Vaikuntha planets with respect to Lord Narayan is kind of formal, respectful friendship. It's called Gaurav Sakhya. Gaurav implies a sense of formality or veneration or reverence. Whereas in Goloka Vrindavan, it is called Vishrambha Sakhya, where the Sakhya, the friendship of the cowherd boys with Krishna, is very, very intimate, very free. There are no constraints there. You see, there is no limitation. There is a sense of equality. There is no inhibition at all. So therefore, in Vrindavan, you will see the cowherd boys will tease Krishna. They will pull his leg. They will physically quarrel with him. They will wrestle with him. They will climb on his shoulders. They will do all these things because this friendship is so sweet. It is so intimate. Therefore, it is called Vishrambha Sakhya. So in Vaikuntha, you have only reverential friendship. So that's why it's called half rasa. Now, why am I mentioning this? Because when there is reverential friendship, you can't have Veer Rasa there. You get the point? Now, generally, we think of Veer Rasa with respect to enemies, yes? Let's say a soldier fighting on the battlefield with the enemy soldiers. So yes, there is Veer Rasa there, and there is also Raudra Rasa. Raudra means anger. So there is anger and there is Veer Rasa there, undoubtedly in these things. But in Vaikuntha, who will fight with Lord Narayan? Because the Shanta Rasa, they don't have a very well developed sense of service attitude compared to the others. The Dasya Rasa are too much in the mood of servitude to ever even dream of, fighting with Lord Narayan. And because those who are friendly to him are in a mood of respectful friendship, so even they cannot imagine fighting with Krishna or having a battle with Krishna. But in Goloka Vrindavan, there's no such issue. To their heart's content, they can engage in the Veer Rasa, the Veer Bhakti Rasa. So essentially, in the nectar of devotion, the descriptions that we find of the Veer Rasa are the Veer Bhakti Rasa that specifically pertain to Goloka, to Vrindavan, not to Vaikuntha. And because these rasas are not available in Vaikuntha, so what happens then? Suppose the Lord in Vaikuntha wants to taste the Veer Rasa. I mentioned earlier that he is the original repository, the original source of all the propensities, including the Rasa of chivalry. So now in Vaikuntha, how does the Lord fulfill his desire to fight? He also has a desire to fight. What does he do? In Krishna, in Goloka Vrindavan, it's easy. He fights with the gopis, he fights with the gopas, the younger cowherd boys. Yes, he fights with them. But in Vaikuntha, who will the Lord fight with? In Goloka Vrindavan, you don't have demons for sure. And in Vaikuntha also, you don't have demons. So what does the Lord do? So the Lord in Vaikuntha says, look, I can't relish this Veer Rasa here, so I must go down to the material world. I will incarnate in the material world. And I'll fight and I'll relish my Veer Rasa. I'll fulfill my desire to relish the Veer Rasa. So then the Lord thinks, look, if I have to go and fight with somebody, now I'm talking of the Lord of Vaikuntha, right? So if the Lord of Vaikuntha thinks I'll have to go down to the material world and to the earth planet, and then I have to engage in fighting with somebody, that somebody can't just be an ordinary person, right? Suppose there's an Olympic gold medalist boxer, yes? And someone like you or me, especially like me, let's say, he said, I challenge you to a bout. What does it mean? There's no meaning to such a thing. So naturally, the gold medalist heavyweight Olympic boxer is not going to accept such a challenge from me. Who am I in boxing? So it will be below his dignity to fight with anybody other than somebody who's in his weight category, who's also been a champion in other tournaments and so on. So in a similar way, when Lord Krishna wants to relish the Veer Rasa and wants to fight with somebody, it has to be somebody so exceptional that it is very rare to find such a person in this material world. So then what does he do? Sometimes he sends his devotees from Vaikuntha on some pretext and tells them, you go there to earth and then you become demons, and when I come down to earth, I will fight with you and I will relish Veer Rasa. So this whole pastime of Jai and Vijay getting cursed by the 4 Kumaras who came to the doorway of Vaikuntha and were not permitted to enter by the 4 Kumaras was all orchestrated by the Supreme Lord, because he wanted to have this arrangement whereby he could incarnate on earth and in the material world, and then have this exchange, this Veer Rasa that he could relish. So then Jai and Vijay came down to the earth or to the material world. Then in the first incarnation they became Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. Then they became Ravana and Kumbhakarna. And then in the third they became Shishupal and Dantavakra. And in each of these 3, the Lord fought with them. Lord Nrsimhadev fought with Hiranyakashipu, Lord Varaha fought with Hiranyaksha. Like that. So the Lord descended and he satisfied his desire to relish the Veer Rasa, the Rasa of chivalry. So that was transcendental because it was the Lord relishing the Rasa. Now, again a question to you. The Lord was relishing the Veer Rasa. But was Hiranyakashipu engaged the activities of Hiranyakashipu in fighting Krishna or Ravana in fighting Ram? Can they be called Veer Bhakti Rasa? For Ram, he was relishing the Veer Rasa. For Krishna, he was relishing Veer Rasa. But were Hiranyakashipu, Ravana, Shishupal, etc. relishing the Veer Rasa, Bhakti Rasa? The answer is no. Why is that? And I'll bring you to an important verse, which I'm sure many of you have committed to your memory. And if you haven't, please do memorize this verse. And that is a verse that gives a definition of pure devotional service. So that is anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavritam anukulyena krishnanu bhakti uttama. Anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhakti uttama. So this defines uttama bhakti, the topmost bhakti. So for some kind of service to be called uttama bhakti, first of all, it must be centered on Krishna or things connected to Krishna. It must be without any fruitive motive. It must be without any desire to merge into the impersonal aspect of the Lord. And also, it must be done anukulyena. Anukulyena means it must be done with an anukul bhav, with a very favorable mentality. And what is the meaning of this favorable mentality? It means that the performer of that service or that activity must have a very strong desire to please the Lord. Now, Ravana pleased the Lord when he was fighting him. So Ram enjoyed Veer Rasa and experienced some bliss. But was Ravana doing bhakti? He wasn't. Because Ravana did not have the motive of wanting to please Ram. Similarly, was Narsingadev rendering devotional service to Lord Narsimhadev? Hiranyakashipu, I beg your pardon, was he rendering devotional service to Lord Narsimhadev? Even though Lord Narsimhadev was relishing Veer Rasa and experiencing transcendental bliss, the efforts of Hiranyakashipu incidentally gave the Lord bliss. But Hiranyakashipu did not have the intention of pleasing the Lord. Therefore, the activities of Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, Shishupal, etc. do not count as bhakti, even though in their interactions with the Lord whilst fighting, the Lord experienced transcendental bliss and the Veer Rasa. So therefore, the Lord enjoyed that Veer Rasa, but we don't consider the fighting of these demons to be Veer Bhakti Rasa. But when it is a devotee who is fighting against Krishna with the mood to please Krishna, yes, then that is called also, that can be called Veer Bhakti Rasa. Can you give an example of that? Just type it. Just type. Bhishma, yes, that's an easy one. So Bhishma, there are several such examples. So Bhishma is the most famous example from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And as you know, Krishna had promised that he would not lift a weapon or fight in the battle of Kurukshetra. So Arjuna was fighting and Krishna was the charioteer. So when Bhishma was fighting with Arjuna, he was also shooting arrows at Krishna. And Bhishma fought so valiantly and so ferociously that he actually forced Krishna to break his vow. Of course, there's a whole history behind it. We don't have the time to go into the history of why Bhishma fought so ferociously, but I'll just say it in very brief, that Bhishma had taken a vow to kill the Pandavas the next day in the battle, and Krishna understood this. Bhishma had kept aside 5 arrows. Duryodhana kept those arrows in his custody, and then Krishna asked Arjuna to go to Duryodhana and get those 5 arrows. Duryodhana gave those 5 arrows because that was asked by a guest who had come. Bhishma understood this was a trick of Krishna, and he said, I had taken a vow to kill the 5 Pandavas with my 5 arrows, and Krishna has made me break my promise. So I will make Krishna break his promise. He has promised that he will not fight in the battle of Kurukshetra, and I will ensure that I put Arjuna into such difficulty that Krishna will be forced to lift a weapon to protect his devotee Arjuna. Now, behind Bhishma's external, apparently vindictive mindset, there is great devotion. Bhishma actually wanted to see the glory of Krishna's quality as Bhakta Vatsala. Bhakta Vatsala means one who is very affectionate to his devotees. So the word Vatsala comes from Vatsa. Vatsa means a calf. So just as a cow is very affectionate to her calf, so similarly, the Lord is very affectionate to his devotees. So Bhishma wanted to glorify Krishna as the topmost Bhakta Vatsala. He wanted to put Arjuna into such difficulty that Krishna would be obliged to break his promise and demonstrate to the world that for the Supreme Lord, the well-being of his devotees is more important than even his own sense of honor and his infamy in the world. If Krishna broke his promise to not fight in the battle of Kurukshetra and he lifted a weapon to fight, then it means that he was not true to his word. He was not a Satyavadi. So people would criticize him. He would lose his honor that he has not spoken the truth. He has broken his word. He would be dishonored in the society. So Krishna is willing to be dishonored in the society if that is the only way by which he can protect his devotee. Because for Krishna there is nothing higher than the love and the well-being of his devotees. So Bhishma wanted to show the whole world the glory of Krishna's love for his devotee, Arjuna. And he also wanted to glorify Arjuna, that for the sake of Arjuna, Krishna has broken his promise and done an act that will bring him great dishonor in the society. Furthermore, Bhishma also understood that even though Krishna had taken this vow to not lift a weapon, he still had that desire to engage, to relish the Veer Rasa. So he said, okay, I will fulfill Krishna's internal desire and I will fight with him. And if I will fight so hard and so valiantly that Krishna will be pleased. Krishna will be happy with me. And Krishna will get bliss. He will be able to relish this Veer Rasa. So then, Bhishma started releasing arrows, arrow after arrow, arrow after arrow. And of course, Krishna's body is spiritual. Even the Atma, the soul, cannot be cut to pieces or harmed by a weapon. Does anyone remember the verse of this Bhagavad Gita, the most basic teachings of 2nd chapter? Can you type the first lines of that? That says that the soul cannot be, yes, that's right, Nainam Chindanti Shastrani. So even the soul cannot be cut into pieces by any weapon. Nainam Dahati Pavakaha. That, you can't, the soul cannot be cut into pieces by a weapon, can't be burned by fire, can't be wet by water or liquid, etc., etc. So when the single soul cannot be cut or injured by any material object, how can Krishna's transcendental body, which is completely spiritual, which is all soul, so to speak, how can that be injured by any weapons or arrows? So from the ontological point of view, from the tattva point of view, there is no question of Krishna's spiritual body becoming injured. But from the rasa point of view, the point of view of tasting certain rasa of battle, of the Veer Rasa, Krishna was there playing the role of a valorous warrior. He was driving the chariot left and right and fast and slow according to the instructions of Arjuna. And his hair was flying and there was dust all over him. And he had injury marks everywhere, and apparently it seemed there was some blood. A spiritual body won't have blood like our blood, but it seemed like that. But Krishna was relishing that. And it is mentioned that the arrows of Bhishma felt to Krishna to be like roses or flower garlands. And at the same time, Krishna relished this rasa, Veer Rasa. So here is an example of a devotee of the Lord, a pure devotee, who was in Dasyaras, Bhishma. But because in the material world he was playing the role of a Kshatriya, and Arjuna was also playing the role of a Kshatriya, as was Krishna himself. So therefore, in this interaction on the battlefield, it was quite natural that the Veer Rasa, Raudra Rasa, Bhayanak Rasa, Bibhatsa Rasa, all these other rasas would also become very prominent. You wouldn't expect to find the Hasya Rasa on the battlefield. You would, maybe to some extent, sometime, if they were making fun of an opponent or something, that's part of the Kshatriya spirit. So in this way, the Veer Rasa, Veer Bhakti Rasa is found or not found. Yes, in all the examples that I have given you so far. So this is a brief background I have given to the whole discussion on the Veer Bhakti Rasa in the Nectar of Devotion. Now and there's an interesting paragraph that I want to read out, which Prabhupada says here on page 368. So I'll just read that small paragraph. In these chivalrous activities, only Krishna's friends can be opponents. Krishna's enemies can never actually be his opponents. Therefore, this challenging by Krishna's friends is called devotional service in chivalrous activities. So that means if a devotee has to be in Veer Bhakti Rasa, he must have a favorable mood towards Krishna. Like Bhishma. But if there is a person fighting against Krishna, but he doesn't have a favorable mood, then even if the Lord is pleased, that is not considered Veer Bhakti Rasa. And coming to Sakhya, the mood of friendship, as I said, in Vaikuntha that's not possible. So the Lord comes here and then he fights with Bhishma, fights with Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu, etc. But in Goloka Vrindavan, it's entirely possible. And it happens frequently. So that same Goloka Vrindavan was manifested here on the earth planet. And in this Vrindavan, 5,000 years ago, Krishna sported and frolicked with his friends, the cowherd boys. And they would sometimes have such pastimes. And they would experience all the other secondary rasas, the Gauna rasas, Hasya, Adbhuta, Veera, Karuna, Raudra, all of that they would experience. So in this description of Veer Bhakti Rasa, Srila Prabhupada quotes Srila Rupa Goswami as saying that there are 4 types of Veer Rasa, of valiant persons. The first is called Yuddha Veer, one who is chivalrous in battle. We have talked about that so far. So Veer Rasa is not only in battle actually, that's only one type of chivalry or valor. But when such valor is exhibited in a fighting spirit towards Krishna or in the presence of Krishna, in a favorable mood to Krishna, then that is called Yuddha Veer Bhakti Rasa. And then there is Dana Veer, one who is very valorous in giving charity. Yes? Then there is Daya Veer, one who is very valorous in being compassionate to somebody. And finally, there is Dharma Veer, who is very valorous in the performance and execution of religious rituals and dharmic duties and so on. So in the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada has discussed all these four categories, and specifically the Yuddha Veera, Bhakti Rasa, the Rasa of chivalry in fighting, predominantly pertains to Vrindavan, to the cowherd boys, predominantly. And therefore most of the examples that are given here are about the cowherd boys having mock fights with Krishna or amongst each other in the presence of Krishna. So the fighting that takes place among the cowherd boys is like the fighting that happens amongst small boys when they play with each other. Right? It's not serious. And so the cowherd boys would challenge Krishna to a battle, and they would wrestle, and sometimes they would have stick fights and shoot arrows at, small make-believe arrows at each other and so on. So the Yuddha Veera Bhakti Rasa will describe all of these things. So I think we've almost done an hour now. So what I'll do is the next time I give a lecture, I'll talk about what the Nectar of Devotion says about these four types of chivalrous personalities. Remember, they all four are in relation to Krishna. Otherwise it wouldn't be Bhakti Rasa. So today what I have done is just given a kind of a background, a setting in which we can appreciate all that Srila Prabhupada mentions here in the Nectar of Devotion under the chivalry rasa. Okay? So fine, I think we'll stop here. Okay, any questions? All right, so there are some questions here. Okay, how about Srimati Radharani, who tries to show she is stronger, like Radha Kund Leela? And also does Srimati Radharani portray all the rasas for the pleasure of Krishna? So, yes, it's a different kind of Veer Rasa. It's a different kind of fight. So there is some kind of Veer Rasa there also, but it is, yes, if you think you're great, if you think you can dig up this pond, don't think I'm any less. I can do much better than you. I'll do it and I'll show you. So this kind of boastful claims and then trying to do something to defeat Krishna in some way, maybe not in physical fighting, but in some accomplishment or something. So it's a kind of chivalrous thing. That mood is like that. Okay? So that is what makes the Leelas of Vrindavan so special. Okay, let me see any other question. 1 minute. The questions are moving too fast, so I'll have to just 1 minute.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, do you want me to read that out, the questions?
Yeah, I think you can read them out. Yeah.
So Maharaj, the next question is from...
you had your question, right? Okay, yeah.
So the question is, Jay and Vijay were devotees before they came to material world. How come due to their non-devotee behavior, in Krishna's service resulted in them not getting their original position back, since they merged into Krishna's body.
Actually, their merging into Krishna's body was a via medium to actually go back and be reinstated in their original positions as doorkeepers of Vaikuntha. So it is not that they actually merged into the body of Krishna, which is a kind of mukti called Sayujya Mukti. So that is not what happened. It was just a via medium. Actually, they went back as doorkeepers of Vaikuntha. Okay? And you had Ankit, you had a question yourself, right?
Yes, Maharaji. So my question is, Maharaji, when Arjuna fought against Kauravas, he was not fighting against Krishna, but he fought for the pleasure of Krishna. Will that be considered as Veer Bhakti Rasa?
Yes. When we come to Yuddha Veera, when we discuss that more, we'll also see that. Essentially, though, we must remember that Yuddha Veer Rasa is primarily amongst the devotees of Krishna. It's not against the enemies of Krishna. Okay, and Rupa Goswami makes one point in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He makes a very subtle distinction between the Veer Rasa and the Raudra Rasa. He said this Veer Bhakti Rasa that is being described here is essentially found amongst the group of devotees for the pleasure of Krishna and the devotees. But if it is a non-devotee who is challenging the devotee and the devotee fights for the pleasure of Krishna on behalf of Krishna, etc., then there is that anger, there is red eyes and everything. So that is an element of Raudra Rasa. So Rupa Goswami mentions that is a subtle distinction between the Raudra Rasa and the Veer Rasa. Although there is an element of chivalry there, of course, when you're there fighting, but specifically the Veer Bhakti Rasa here refers to the Yuddha Veera Bhakti Rasa, refers to chivalry amongst friends. Mostly in Goloka Vrindavan, and there is one example given of Krishna and Arjuna mock fighting with each other in front of Mother Kunti. Like that. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaji. Next question is from Asim Prabhu. Thank you, Guru Maharaji, for the nice class. Could you please indicate if Lord Shiva fighting Krishna, V. Banasura, is Veer Bhakti Rasa?
Well, Lord Shiva's is definitely like that. There is, it's not Goloka Vrindavan. It's not the mood of Goloka Vrindavan, because Yuddha Veer can be directed towards Krishna. It can be directed against another devotee with Krishna as a spectator. And Krishna relishing that fight because it's amongst friends. So here is a category, something similar to Bhishma. Bhishma fighting against, or rather Lord Shiva fighting against Lord Krishna. Now there was an external reason for that, just as Bhishma had an external reason why he was fighting against Krishna. The whole history of that battle. Similarly for Lord Shiva, he was trying to fight on behalf of, to protect his worshipper, Kashiraj. But that was the external reason. But internally, Shiva was also a great devotee. Vaishnavanam Yathashambhu. So we can say that yes, definitely, that's also kind of Veer Rasa, although it may not come under the category of Yuddha Veer Bhakti Rasa of Vrindavan. But it's something akin to Bhishma's relishing of the Veer Rasa. Okay?
Next question, Maharaji, is from Vicha Mataji. Our question is, after Kamsavat, this Yuddha Veer Rasa was exchanged with a Gopa friend who also had a mock fight with Krishna in Mathura.
Mm-hmm.
Richa Mataji, can you please write your question again? It's not complete.
Yes, so when Krishna has mock fights with his friends, the Gopas, Prabhupada uses the word mock fights. So, I mean, they really get angry and all that, the cowherd boys, and they will taunt the other just like the Kshatriyas do in the battle, In Hindi, they say, Yuddha mein lalkarna. Yeah? So in a battle, they will incite the anger of the other person. So they get incited. There are a lot of technical things here. I mean, it's all described by Rupa Goswami. The incitement comes from somebody. But amongst the friends, they will imitate that, they will do that, maybe get into the mood also. But there is a sweetness there. Because it's all in a very loving mood and it's, based on the platform of just pure devotion. In that very friendly and intimate kind of a mood. Okay, somebody asked, what about Jambavan? Yes, also similar. But we must remember that Jambavan did not know that, at least for the first 28 days when he was fighting Krishna, that Krishna was the same Ram that he had served in Treta Yuga. Now there could be other ways of fighting. Remember I said there are 4 kinds of chivalrous personalities. Yuddhavir is only one of them, that is for the friends. And there could be other ways in which one could exhibit valor, even on the battlefield. And we'll see that for the next lecture, when we'll actually start discussing these short and beautiful pastimes that Rupa Goswami has mentioned. Okay, another question here is your thoughts on so-called fights between devotees in their service, when they're all trying to please Krishna, or is it their egos? I think very, very relevant question. So, it's a mixed bag. The answer is a mixed bag. See, because we are not in the platform of pure devotion. So therefore, in our fights, we have a mix of ego, self-interest, maybe a little desire for position or prestige or name and fame or some material gain or whatever, to whatever small degree it may be there, that may affect our so-called fights and quarrels. So our fights, that is the fights of the devotees amongst each other, are not exactly on the platform of pure devotional service, number one. So therefore we have to try to see that the negative aspects of our psychology are kept in the background and they don't come in the forefront when we have these disagreements with devotees. Number one. Number two, Srila Prabhupada says that sometimes even devotees may have disagreements on some points. Prabhupada was implying that even if there is no overt expression of ego or self-interest, but both are very genuinely and sincerely feeling that their respective viewpoints are correct. And both are sincerely trying to do it for Krishna. Then the next step is to be humble and reasonable and sort it out in a Vaishnava-like manner. That is the test of the maturity of the devotees. And to make sure that we don't stop talking to each other and then talk ill about each other, and all those things, that we don't do that. And ultimately, Prabhupada says that even despite everything, we must understand that if such disagreements are happening on a sincere platform, then these are to be considered transcendental quarrels. Now, that doesn't mean that it's an incentive to us to get into quarrels with other devotees and justify it by saying that It's transcendental quarrel after all. Because we have to be very careful about Vaishnava Parad. We have to be very careful that no untoward element has entered into our psychology even without our knowing so. Okay? Okay, another question is, does it mean then that every divine or demoniac act that is happening today is a setting for Krishna to relish some or the other rasa? No, not necessarily. Every divine or demoniac act that is being performed here on earth is being done because the individual performing those acts is being impelled by the modes of nature under whose control he is. So now people are in the wet markets, they're killing all these wild animals, they're doing all of that. So it's not that Krishna has some purpose in getting them to kill the wild animals, not like that. So these people are doing it by misuse of their own independence. They are being prompted by the mode of ignorance to do all that. So it is not that Krishna wants to relish some rasa by getting some people to kill some animals. Those people are experiencing the perverted, highly perverted rasas. Like they get some kind of a perverse pleasure in killing, that animal. There's some kind of a distortion there, very gross perversion of the rasas. But Krishna takes no pleasure in that. What the examples that I mentioned earlier was that they were done by the arrangement of Krishna, like Jaya and Vijay is coming down. Those are exceptionally special cases, not found just like that for everybody. Okay? And next question is, does Lord Vishnu in Vaikuntha derive any rasa when Lord Krishna himself descended to kill Kamsa and Shishupal? Okay, interesting. Yes, Lord Vishnu did relish the Veer Rasa when Krishna killed Kamsa and Shishupal. You know why? Srila Prabhupada explains this. He says in Vrindavan, Krishna doesn't kill. In Goloka Vrindavan, he's just herding the cows, he's having mock fights with the cowherd boys, having pastimes with the gopis. It does all this. In Goloka Vrindavan, in the spiritual world, there are no asuras there with whom he will fight and kill and so on. So Krishna's mood as a cowherd boy, the mood of Vrindavan, does not permit Krishna of Vrindavan to kill. But then we see that in Krishna's pastimes in Bhauma Vrindavan, that Krishna did kill so many asuras. So how does one reconcile this? One reconciles this by understanding that because Krishna is the original personality of Godhead, all the expansions of Krishna, all the Vishnu forms, all the avatars, they all reside within him at all times. So even when Krishna descends to this material world in Vrindavan, all the other forms of the Lord are within him, so to speak. And Srila Prabhupada explains that when Krishna kills a demon in Vrindavan, it is not Krishna of Vrindavan who is killing, but it is the Vishnu form within Krishna, who is the expansion of Krishna, who does the killing of that demon. So in that sense, Lord Vishnu, through Krishna, is relishing also Veer Rasa. Okay? Okay. So I think we are over time now. So as far as Facebook is concerned, all the Facebook devotees, sorry I couldn't take your questions. Maybe some other time we can meet at some point. If we have the opportunity, we can do so. So we'll say Hare Krishna to all the Facebook devotees. Hare Krishna. And